I made a presentation to the scholastics, and I'd just like to share the 7 points I shared during this meeting. And it's a summary of things that I have thought about, having seen the different conferences, different places in the world for formation. And I thought these were some of the points that would be worth thinking about. First point that I'd like to emphasize is the point about prayer and the need for it. Not just for the strengthening of one's vocation, but really as a matter of Jesuit identity, because of our special gift through the spiritual exercises. It's really the Jesuit gift, and therefore I would think that someone who chose to enter the Society of Jesus would also be a man of the exercises, would be able to direct people, would be able to take distance and pray and consider how God moves in our lives and how one must live one's life as a Christian. So that's the first point, and the prayer I think I put as number one because I think it is the priority. My second point has to do with the impression I had when I came into the Nobili, which was a very big house, and I was struck by the numbers and by the realization that in a house as big as this, it's very possible to be anonymous. It's very possible to disappear, to just stay below the horizon, as it were, and not be noticed. And it's good, I guess. There's a certain privacy involved here, but there are downsides to this, and here they talk about freedom and responsibility, but it's not just freedom and responsibility so you can do anything and everything you want. I would add the extra word with responsibility. It's responsibility and accountability, that you have to be accountable to people and to community, to various other structures. And in the society, we have very natural structures which are there for us to take advantage of. I just identify three. First, the whole idea of the account of conscience and the transparency that we are asked to have when we make our account of conscience. It demands transparency from formies and from all Jesuits to tell everything and to be transparent and to be honest and to be as open as one can, because transparency is at the service of mission. A second structure which is already there is spiritual direction, and the reality that spiritual direction should be a confidential space, should encourage openness and great transparency. And the third structure that's here in South Asia, which might not be in other parts, but it's here, is the logbook. And I'm sure you know about that already, and I won't go into details. But it's a way of taking responsibility for one's own formation. So that's the second point. It has to do with accountability, transparency, in the context of freedom and responsibility, in a context of anonymity. The third point is just to emphasize that the mission at this point in one's formation, in one's Jesuit life, is studies. That is the main theme. And it means laboring through deadlines, through papers, through classes, etc., etc. But more important than going through the hoops in the studies is knowing what the studies are for. What's the point of the studies at this time? And for philosophy, the point is simple. It is to know the world in which we will serve, to know the world in which we live. And for some, philosophy is the framework by which we can understand better the situation in which we live. So if our classes do not help us understand this world, then we should make an extra effort to try to see what the point of Kant or Heidegger or whoever philosopher we're studying, or Aristotle, what is the point and what are they saying about the world? Theology is really a challenge for us to know the faith and the church which we are asked to serve in. We who commit ourselves to this vocation must therefore commit ourselves to the church that we are asked to serve. Those are the 2 points, but I add the third point, which is language, which is the importance of making sure that we know language and know language well because of the importance of communication. And here in India, there's so many chances to learn many languages. But also important is to learn the language of the Society of Jesus: English, Spanish, and French. And English, I know you guys know well already, but to know it better even, to be able to communicate even better to people would help. And if you can do Spanish and French as well, that would be excellent. So the third point is studies. Point number 4 has to do with poverty and preparing for the frontier. And realizing on the one hand that poverty is not absolute. It's not the all, and it's a means to an end. It helps us do our mission. So we're always torn between two forces. One force asks us to be effective in anything that we do, and therefore use everything: computers, vehicles, gadgets. Use all that we can to do the mission, but to remind ourselves every now and then that even these are not your absolutes. And that we are asked to challenge ourselves to work with as little as we can, to getting used to the little that we have. Because one, we become more available when we have less baggages in life. Number 2, the solidarity with people, many of whom are very poor. And number 3, it's for edification, for people to see that we are witnesses to Christ poor. The 5th point has to do with working in teams and realizing that the mission of the future is never going to be an individual task anymore, and that we will have to learn to work in teams. And with this, there is a great advantage here in South Asia, because already you're exposed to a variety of languages, ethnicities, personality types. And the challenge, I think, is to become more inclusive, to try to adjust, to try to learn to work with as many different kinds of people, with as many different languages and different customs, different personalities as we can. And I guess it's natural to have friends, to have people you are naturally close to, same language, same year, same interests, same hobbies. But more important, I think, is also to break out of those and to learn to include others here in the formation house, to include people whom you are not used to, people you're not comfortable with. And that's number 5. This effort to try to build our sense of being team, working always with a team. Point number 6 is a lesson we learned from the experience of the many sexual abuse cases in the West we have had to face in the last few years. And I think this underlines not just chastity, the importance of vow, but the importance of keeping the trust of the people we serve. Because a violation like this, when abuse is done, is really a violation of the trust that people have in its priests, in its servants. And therefore, we endanger the church and we endanger the Society of Jesus whenever things like this happen. And I think even now, if we feel we cannot live this life of chastity, we should be honest. We should try to confront ourselves early on. And if we see in our companions that there is difficulty, then we should also be challenging of them as we are challenging of us ourselves. Otherwise, we will not learn from this whole experience in the West. And I think we should learn from it and come out of it stronger as men of the vows. Finally, and this is the 7th point, it's an invitation to some frontiers which are not so obvious. GC35 talked about going to the frontiers, and for many of us, frontiers means difficult mission, places that are hard to reach, working with difficult situations like war or famine or hunger, which are really frontier missions. But I'd like to identify 2 frontiers, because frontier also is said of works and missions that people don't want to do. And just two other things that I'd like to invite you to consider. One is the frontier of the intellectual apostolate, because it's not easy and not all are called to it. You have to have the gift for it, and you have to have the capacity to sit and to make sure that you are able to do this kind of work for life. It's a commitment. And yet it's an important service to the church and to the world. And if we, among us, among Jesuits, we can find ourselves bearing these gifts, I think it's worth sharing to the world and considering for us. The second frontier is formation work. And because we know that this is something that many of us would rather not do. And yet it's important work because it prepares the future for the society. And perhaps it's something worth considering. So there you are, 7 simple points for your reflection, for your consideration. And my hope is that each Jesuit can move forward and in discernment, in prayer, in considering his vocation, and in considering the best ways in which to serve the Lord and His people.